Uncle Mark.
Yeah. What is it? What do you want from me? What do you want?
Well, tis the season. See, it's
your
it's
house.
a beautiful time
Your
of year.
house.
No, you listen here.
My mouth's bleeding. It's the time of year when people bust out the classics.
Sure.
I've been saving it, but this is the week I'm going to watch Die Hard, as I always do.
Die Hard. I don't. If people who say that's not a Christmas movie are the worst people alive.
It's Christmas is integral to the plot of the show.
Yeah.
It's a Christmas movie.
How do you say now I have a machine gun and not have ho 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 ho? Anyway.
Yeah, I mean, like yippee-ki-yay, motherfuckers. That's what Santa yells when he gets in the sleigh, right?
I mean, honestly,
In my
you've
world.
got Scrooge and Hans Gruber, and the Grinch. Those are the three great Christmas villains, and I don't know how anyone can say otherwise.
Arguably the best Christmas movie, and in fact, this is literally true, is The Lion in Winter, right? It's a Christmas movie. You got your Peter O'Toole, you got your Katharine Hepburn.
I'm
You
50
got
alive
your
and
Anthony
king all
Hopkins.
at the
You
same
got Tony
time.
Hopkins. You got Timothy Dalton. I mean, it's a cast of several.
Yeah. It's
I suppose I should just take it from here, huh?
yeah. Go ahead.
All right. Well, dear
I was
uncles,
really enjoying our conversation, but fine. Go ahead, Doug.
I will ruin that. As is no doubt obvious to all who are listening to this podcast, 'tis the season. For our listeners who are catching this episode when it comes out, this is Christmas week. We have covered Christmas and all its baggage on this show many times before. We've discussed in episode 13 how the foundational story of Christmas is an amalgamation of mostly two contradictory stories in the Bible. How early
Or
Christians...
just unrelated.
unrelated. Contradictory, though, for sure.
Yeah.
How early Christians in 336 transplanted Jesus' birthday to the pagan solstice. How the Christmas tree is a sop to that self-same pagan holiday. How gift-giving is a vestige of the wise men, or magi, from the book of Matthew that Uncle Dan talked about just weeks ago in episode 168, even though the actual, read mythical, gift-giving took place up to 2 years after Jesus' birth, and almost certainly not on his birthday. But oh well. And we've talked about how the celebration of the humble birth of a prophet whose entire mission in life would be to rail against wealth and consumerism has morphed into an orgiastic and ostentatious spending spree on planet-killing, plastic-covered electronics, assembled not by elves, but by Chinese children for slave wages. Instead of, say, spending that money... Merry Christmas. Instead of, say, spending that money on the poor as Jesus repeatedly commanded. All it makes is sense. So today, I would like to explore another strange and vestigial Christmas tradition that is as ingrained in our collective Americana as apple pie and systemic racism. Today, I want to talk about It's a Wonderful Life.
Wonderful.
For those of you...
I've got my bell ready. I'm going to start doling out some wings.
Clarence!
For those of you who have never heard of this film, that means you either had merciful parents or you're young. In either case, I hate you. This film can be found playing somewhere in the cable universe from mid-October all the way through Christmas, and boasts some of the most iconic scenes in film history, as well as perhaps the most famous ending ever. Now, I want to tread carefully so as not to piss off the Gamcast boys, lest in their anger they dispatch the member of their trio who is obviously the muscle, Eli Bosnick, to come and break my thumbs. So
I'm pretty sure it's Heath.
I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, but Eli's the one who'd bring a spider.
You know, Eli is the master to Heath's blaster. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time picking apart the plot, the performances, or the dialogue, but rather focus on some of the troubling religious, socioeconomic, and racial themes of the movie, and there are some. I was surfing the channels the other day and saw this movie on, and out of a sense of nostalgia, and because I'm not ready to start the Queen just yet, I stopped for a minute, and I'll get to the scene that I happened upon in just a minute, but as you'll see, it caught me off guard in a big way. So I started thinking about the plot and the themes of the movie, and ta-da, I had my segment for the day. Let's start off with the movie itself, made and set in 1946 by Frank Capra, a prolific filmmaker of the 1930s and 1940s. He directed such classics as Mr. Smith Goes to Washington and You Can't Take It With You, as well as a ton of propaganda films for the U.S. government during World War II, including The Negro Soldier, which is not nearly as problematic as it sounds, and Know Your Enemy, Japan.
It sounds pretty problematic.
Well, the Know Your Enemy, Japan is definitely that problematic.
Yeah.
The film stars, of course, Jimmy Stewart. That's It's a Wonderful Life, not Know Your Enemy, Japan. Jimmy Stewart as George Bailey, Donna Reed as his wife Mary, Lionel Barrymore as the villainous Mr. Potter, and Henry Travers.
That's Drew's grandpa, by the way.
Yeah, that's right. And Henry Travers as the hapless guardian angel Clarence Oddbody. The film is set in the sleepy town of Bedford Falls, New York, and follows the down-on-his-luck George Bailey. George has sacrificed all his life so that others can prosper, including by staying and to run the family business, a savings and loan, even though he hates it. His forgetful uncle accidentally misplaces the last $8,000, which the evil Mr. Potter finds and pockets, leading to certain financial ruin for George and his family. He soon realizes that his life insurance is the only way out for his family, so believing himself to be more worth dead than alive, he gets ready to throw himself into a freezing river. That's when the hapless guardian angel leaps in first, forcing George to save him. Clarence has been sent to help George, and if successful, he might finally earn his angel wings. More on that in a little bit. Clarence then shows George what the world would be like were he never born. His brother, whom he pulled out of an icy river, would have died, and therefore not fought in World War II, where he saved some 200 men in a troop transport. His boss at his first job in a pharmacy would have drunkenly poisoned a family by administering the wrong drug because George wasn't there to stop him. And the sleepy Rockwell-esque town of Bedford Falls has been turned into the den of iniquity called Pottersville, complete with bars, dance halls, and pawn shops.
Oh no. Skun-dun-dun. A fate worse than death.
Exactly. And this
no, you've got the jazz in here. Look what's happened.
And this downtown Pottersville is basically downtown anywhere America in the 21st century. So
right.
Worst of all, and we'll come back to this, Mary has never married and has become a lonely, sad spinster.
Aww.
Now convinced of his value and realizing how lucky he was all along, he begs for his old life back, and it's granted. He returns home only to be confronted by officers of the bank that are there to foreclose on him at his home in front of his family on Christmas Eve.
Which,
well, it's more relevant than ever.
That's true.
Yeah, exactly.
The eviction
was
crisis.
Was the forecloser named something like Bezos? Was it? I don't remember exactly.
But
Amazon is going to come and foreclose on you, right?
Yeah. Hey, man, you never know. But wouldn't you know it, the whole town has heard about his plight, and one by one they crowd into his house to share whatever cash they can, saving his house and business. The scene ends with his hero brother toasting him as the richest man in town as everyone sings Auld Lang Syne. A bell rings on the Christmas tree, and George's daughter says, "Daddy, Daddy." Teacher says every time a bell rings, an angel gets his wings. Fade to black.
That's right. That's right.
In spite of all the problems with this movie, if you can watch that scene and not tear up, there is something fundamentally wrong with you. Okay.
I mean, there is something fundamentally wrong with me, but it's not that.
It's not that. There's something else. Okay. So a man at his lowest point is shown his true value to all those around him and how a life of selflessness has made the lives of those around him better. And in his time of need, they come to return the favor. What could be a better message than that? Well, there's a wee bit more to it. Let's go back to the beginning of the movie. How it actually begins is we hear the voiceover of all of George's neighbors praying to God because their good friend is in trouble. Then we venture far out into space, somewhere near Kolob, to hear two galaxies, clearly meant to represent God and one of his angels named Joseph, talking to each other. You guys remember that? The galaxies kind of glowed as they said words to each other.
It's been a minute since I saw this movie.
Yeah,
So.
I'm going to admit something. I don't think I've seen that movie since I was probably 12.
Okay.
Yeah.
So these two galaxies are talking to each other. They say that because of the volume of prayers they're getting, they're going to have to send someone down to deal with this George. Okay, first problem. What is the threshold of prayer necessary to stir these divine beings into action? Is it a dozen? 2 dozen? If only a couple of George's neighbors had decided to pray for him, would he have been left alone to kill himself?
I love the thought anytime anybody says, because you see this all over the place. Well, we've got 20,000 people praying for this, that, and the other. And it's like, how is that any better than one person praying?
Right,
like,
exactly.
If it's the right thing for God to do, shouldn't he already
Does he
have
need
figured
to
that
be like,
out?
yeah, does he need to be pushed into action? Let's also remember that this film is taking place in 1946. mere months after the largest catastrophe in human history had just taken place. Apparently, there were not enough
Chernobyl?
prayers lodged by the Polish, Belarusian, or German Jews.
Right.
These supremely powerful beings sat in somber silence as Hitler rolled over Europe and Stalin starved his people. But look out! There's 17 people praying for a banker in upstate New York. Let's do something.
Well, they're white Americans, Doug.
There you go. So, who do they decide to send on this ever-important mission? Why, hapless old Clarence, an angel that despite 200 years of trying has yet to get his wings. They claim that it's his turn, and they must send him. I mean, what are you going to do? It's his turn. It also means that for 200 years, Clarence has been sent to Earth to try and help other people, but has failed utterly. Where's that movie?
Right?
Right?
Can we make that?
Uh,
I don't think we need billionaire money, but we should definitely make that movie.
no doubt. Of Clarence, the two deities say he's got the IQ of a rabbit, but the faith of a child.
Which
What-
is supposed to be a good thing, probably.
I guess, but what part does faith play in the life of an angel?
Right?
Isn't the whole having faith part of the journey supposed to be over when you're, an angel?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Not a lot of mystery left at that point.
exactly. These two deities then show Clarence George's life in order to help him understand how to help him, from childhood to the fateful bridge. This is where we meet one of the only two people of color in the film. Well, there's three, actually. I misspoke. It's the Bailey's maid, Annie. Let's just say her character would feel just as at home in a Tom and Jerry cartoon. George and his brother Harry are horsing around, and Harry chases Annie into the kitchen as he gives her a big slap on the butt. This is the scene I happen to tune into. I'm like, oh,
Yikes.
I don't remember that. Okay. The only other people of color we see in the movie are a train conductor and a jazz musician playing the devil's music in one of the gin joints in Pottersville. Once you notice this, it's pretty apparent. To be fair to this movie, it was a product of its time and place. It's just that its time and place were Jim Crow America.
Right.
It makes one wonder what this movie feels like from basically any other perspective.
Right.
We go on to see George fall in love, give up his dreams of travel, and break his spirit fighting the evil capitalist Mr. Potter. He has to forego his honeymoon to prevent a run on his bank, while his friends and family all go on to move to the big city and take lucrative jobs. This all leads to his attempted suicide and glimpse into the alternate future. It's here that we bump into another big bit of a problem. As mentioned before, while wandering this dystopian present, we see his beloved Mary. Because she never met George, she never found true love, and never married. At the ripe old age of 38, she's an old maid, alone, useless, and hopeless. Worse, he finds her closing up her shift at the library.
Oh.
I know.
Oh,
The
the
spinster's
fate
doom.
of all unlovable spinsters, right?
Exactly.
In the great American narrative.
Exactly.
Right.
The problem the filmmakers had and did not overcome is that it's not possible to portray Donna Reed as anything but impossibly beautiful.
Right.
And rather than looking like an old maid, she looks like the librarian at the beginning of an 80s hairband video.
Right.
George begins chasing her, so terrified she runs into a bar where George gets into a fight with a cop and runs away. And in what is probably the most believable part of the movie, the cop opens fire on a crowded street.
Wow.
Having seen enough, George returns home to the aforementioned happy ending. Here's the thing, though. Although Clarence, and by extension God, showed George the world without him, they did nothing to solve his crisis in World 1.
Right.
If his neighbors had not taken it upon themselves to rescue George, he would have lost his house and business and been in the same predicament he was at the beginning. Remember that old phrase we used to hear in church, pray as if everything depended on you, but act as if everything... Sorry, pray as if everything depends on God, but act as if everything depends on you.
Uh-huh.
Well, why not cut out the middleman?
Yeah, exactly.
George's
The
neighbors...
result is the same whether you believe in the God part or not.
Exactly. George's neighbor saved his bacon because he had been a decent man throughout his life, and before you try and claim that God inspired his neighbors to take action, this was the same God who was busy ignoring George's plight at the beginning of the film, along with the Holocaust. And not for nothing, but not only is Potter never punished for his shady dealings and outright theft, but he remains an ever-powerful specter in Bedford Falls. All George did at the end of the movie was stave off Potter's latest but certainly not last attempt to take the savings and loan.
Right.
Where's that movie? Lastly, did God create an alternate reality in which all the pain and misery of Pottersville came to pass just to show George how good he had it? At the same time he was building a wonderful life with Mary, Was she growing old, alone, and afraid in this alternate reality? And what happened after George left? Did God simply snuff out the lives of all those people or just let the reality continue to play out? Hashtag, what happened to Pottersville? Okay, I think I've peed enough in everyone's Cheerios. Thematically, racially, and sexually, this movie is highly problematic. But like most Christmas traditions, we can know the truth and still be at least resigned to it. So watch it, try not to think too hard about it, and try not to cry at the ending. Most of all, try not to think about the fact that in all likelihood, we are living in the Pottersville timeline.
Well, I love that, and again, I'm admitting I haven't really seen the movie, but I've heard a lot of people talk about it. But the great sin of the ogre Potter is charging 3% interest.
That's right.
Yeah, like people would fucking kill each other to get 3% interest.
That's right.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's it didn't win any awards. It won one technical award for the snow. Because,
interesting.
Yeah, the snow, if you watch the movie, is very realistic. It's kind of shockingly realistic. But
Take note, Uncle Mark.
But they were
learn to do it.
They were filming in L.A. in 90-degree heat.
Wow.
So they came up with this new kind of snow that was a firefighting chemical called fomite.
I thought you were going to say asbestos. I was sure you were going to say
there's
asbestos.
something terrible.
Well, almost every firefighting chemical is extremely toxic.
Right, exactly.
Fire retardants are deadly, deadly toxic.
Yeah. But so there you go. This American Life. I mean, God damn it.
Three times this week, Dan and I would say, Doug, what are you doing? And he'd be like, This American Life. And we're like, okay, well.
I mean,
we're taking on Ira Glass, I guess.
Yeah.
I almost got through it. It's a Wonderful Life.
We're taking on the insidious Jew behind NPR's beloved documentary series.
Yeah. All right. Well, thanks, Uncle Doug. It is a Wonderful Life and an American Life.
Merry Christmas!
Let's move on.